Ready when y'all are.
First of all, you said this thing was embarrassing, and seems like it was.
It was. This report didn't hold back any punches. And the downside is for decades there's been mismanagement and insolvency. And I think a lot of us are fed up with it.
Talk a little bit about some of what they found in this report. It just seems like poor record keeping, and this has been going on for years. How much is this costing taxpayers?
Well, it's over $20 million over the last decade, and that's with respect to capital outlay that's been invested that hasn't been put in appropriately. And each year we subsidize the state fair, which is supposed to be independent. Taxpayers subsidize it to the tune of about $1 million every year. And as a result, it still operates independently and basically creates its own rules, yet we subsidize it just like we would a government agency.
Right now, how much does it owe the state? I know I saw a figure in there, it owes GSD like close to $2 million or something.
Yeah, $1.7 million is owed to the state, and there's also several vendors who owe Expo New Mexico money. So there's about $600,000 in funds they haven't collected from their vendors, and then in turn they owe others $1.7 million.
What is your reaction when they're not collecting on some of these people that owe them money, like the Downs, for example?
Well, they need to take immediate action. It's shocking and appalling that they haven't already. So whether it's lawsuits by the state or various collection methods or renegotiating a new contract, that needs to be taken care of and should have been taken care of years ago.
Should the state fair cease to exist if it's losing money at this rate?
I don't think so. I think the fact that a third of the state still goes to the state fair means it's worth protecting. I think we just need to make it an asset for our city and state instead of a money pit.
A lot of, some of the rural lawmakers were saying in there, this is no longer a state fair, it's a misnomer. Do you think that the state should be bailing out the state fair every year?
Well, I think for the time being, we owe it to the state fair and a third of the state that does go there to put on a wonderful state fair. But we do have to answer the question long term, and that's why we shouldn't be jumping into any rushed 25-year land deals or anything of that nature until we figure out exactly what the future is for the state fair.
On that note, it sounds like the Downs of Albuquerque is maybe the odds-on favorite to get a new lease. Why should the Downs of Albuquerque, if it already owes the state a ton of money, why should they be extended a lease?
Well, I don't have any insider information on that. I don't know. I do find it hard to believe that an entity that hasn't paid their bills would then be given a new contract without having to pay their bills. So hopefully the governor's office and the State Fair Commission and the State Fair Management will read into that. It's their job to make a right decision on this, and we want a tenant that we're proud of.
Is it a reality that, as Senator McSorley mentioned, if certain events and certain contracts were signed, is it a reality that the state fair could just go away?
Well, it certainly could. However, we as a state legislature have funded it every year to make sure that it's solvent, and I think we'd continue to do that at least in the short term until we figure out what the long-term solution is. So in reality, there's no danger of the state fair going away at all. What we have to correct is the long and medium-term financial situation for an organization that's been failing for years.
Should there be like a time limit on, okay, the state fair, for whatever reasons, is terribly screwed up and has been terribly screwed up, but we'll give it 2 years, 3 years? In your mind, does there come a statute of limitations for when taxpayer dollars need to be in the black rather than the red, and then eventually make a decision whether the state fair should continue?
Well, we've got to look at all the options on the table, and I do think it's appropriate to put a timeline on it. And so the first step is reining in the state fair in terms of the contracts they sign and the oversight they have, and that's legislation I'm going to work on in this next session. And so we're going to put them under a microscope and make sure at least things are run appropriately and everyone's held accountable and every last dollar is tracked. Once we do that, then we can say, all right, what are we going to do for the next 10 years? And that's when we can address that question.
You mentioned that the state fair should be independently run, do you think it'll help for DFA to step in and provide all this oversight? Should the state have to even do that?
Yeah. I don't think it should be independently run. It's time that we essentially take it over as a turnaround for the short term and right the ship and then figure out what we're going to do in the long term.